I'm Amelia Mitchell, 32, working as a financial analyst at Jensen and Partners in Boston. I've always been the responsible one, the daughter who strived to make my parents proud. When their 35th anniversary approached, I wanted to create the perfect celebration they deserved. I spent $18,500 on a yacht party with a live orchestra and premium wines, planning every detail to show my love. I never imagined that a week later, I'd be standing in the rain outside my apartment building with all my belongings in trash bags. Before I tell you how my entire family betrayed me, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and subscribe for more real-life stories that might save you from the mistakes I made. Growing up in the Mitchell household, family always came first, at least that's what we were taught. My parents, Robert and Eleanor Mitchell, created what seemed like the perfect New England family. Dad built his accounting practice from scratch, while Mom managed a small art gallery. They weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable, living in a colonial-style home in a good school district outside Boston. From my earliest memories, I wanted nothing more than my parents' approval. As the middle child between my older brother Daniel and younger sister Rachel, I often felt invisible unless I was achieving something noteworthy. Daniel, now 35, was the golden boy, the handsome, charismatic son who could charm anyone. He went into real estate development and married Jenna, who came from a well-connected family. Rachel, 28, was the baby of the family, beautiful, social media savvy, and everyone's darling as a rising fashion influencer. And then there was me, reliable, responsible Amelia. I worked twice as hard as my siblings in school, graduated with honors, and secured a position at a prestigious financial firm. Yet somehow, my accomplishments never seemed to shine as brightly in my parents' eyes. Amelia always has her head in a spreadsheet, my father would joke at family gatherings. Thank goodness, we have her to keep track of everything. That became my role in the family, the organized one, the planner, the financial advisor. Whenever my parents needed help with taxes or investment decisions, they called me. When they wanted to refinance their mortgage, I spent hours researching the best rates and helping with paperwork. When their car broke down and they needed $3,000 for repairs, I transferred the money immediately, waving away their vague promises to pay me back. Daniel and Rachel received different treatment. When Daniel needed $50,000 for a down payment on his first investment property, my parents remortgaged their house. When Rachel wanted to launch her fashion blog, they funded her equipment, wardrobe, and even a trip to New York Fashion Week. Their justification was always the same: Daniel will make it big and take care of us in our old age, or Rachel is building something special. She just needs a little boost. Our family had a tradition of celebrating anniversaries in grand style. For their 30th, we had rented a small country house for the weekend, inviting close friends and family. I had handled most of the planning then too, though my siblings contributed equally to the costs. As their 35th approached a milestone anniversary, I was determined to create something unforgettable. This needs to be special, I told my siblings during a family dinner 8 months before the date. 35 years is no small achievement. What are you thinking? Daniel asked, sipping his wine. Something simple and elegant at the Harbor Hotel. I shook my head. I was thinking something more memorable. Mom always talks about how they never had a proper honeymoon because they couldn't afford it. What if we give them that experience now? My parents had married young. Mom was only 25 and Dad 27. They'd saved for a honeymoon in the Mediterranean, but then Dad's father had a heart attack, and they used their savings to help with medical bills. Their honeymoon became a weekend at a local bed and breakfast. They deserve something extraordinary, I continued. Something that shows how much we appreciate everything they've done for us. Looking back, I realize I wasn't just planning a celebration for my parents. I was orchestrating what I thought would finally win me the recognition I'd been seeking my entire life. If I could create the perfect anniversary celebration, something so thoughtful and magnificent that it would bring tears to their eyes, maybe then they would see me, truly see me, as more than just the reliable middle child who helped with finances. That evening, as we lingered over dessert, we agreed to create something spectacular together. Daniel, Rachel, and I clinked glasses, making a pact to share the responsibilities and costs equally. It seemed so sincere in that moment, their eyes bright with enthusiasm, voices eager as we brainstormed ideas. How could I have known it was the beginning of the most expensive lesson of my life? Planning began in earnest the next day. I created a shared document where we could compile ideas and track expenses. My vision was taking shape, a sophisticated celebration that would reflect my parents' journey together, elegant but not ostentatious, meaningful rather than merely impressive. When I mentioned a yacht charter during our second planning meeting, Daniel's eyes lit up. "Now that's an idea," he said, leaning forward. "Dad always wanted to own a boat. Remember how he used to take us to the harbor just to look at them?" Rachel nodded enthusiastically. "We could have it in June when the weather's perfect. Mom would love being on the water at sunset." The more we discussed it, the more perfect a yacht seemed. My parents had often talked about taking a cruise for their retirement, but had repeatedly postponed it to help with Daniel's business ventures or Rachel's career launches. I researched charter companies, comparing prices, reviews, and packages. The Serenity, a 100-foot luxury yacht with capacity for 60 guests, seemed ideal. It had 3 decks, including a spacious main salon that could accommodate dining and dancing. "It's $8,500 for a 4-hour charter," I explained during our next meeting. "That includes the crew, basic catering, and standard decorations." "That sounds reasonable, split 3 ways," Daniel said, barely looking up from his phone. "Totally doable," Rachel agreed, scrolling through Instagram. But the yacht was just the beginning. My parents loved classical music. They had met at a symphony concert in college, so I contacted Boston's premier string orchestra, Quartet Elegance. They quoted $3,000 for the evening, including their signature performance of romantic classics and the ability to take special requests. Mom and Dad's first dance was to Pachelbel's Canon, I reminded my siblings. Imagine their faces when a live orchestra plays it as we sail past the city skyline. The catering needed to be upgraded from the standard package to include my father's favorite prime rib carving station and my mother's preferred seafood selections. The basic bar package wouldn't do either. My father was a wine enthusiast who had been collecting bottles for special occasions for years. "I found a wine supplier who can provide Dad's favorite Bordeaux," I explained. "And they have that limited edition Chardonnay Mom loved at the Wilsons' anniversary last year." As weeks passed, I sent regular updates to Daniel and Rachel. Their responses grew increasingly delayed and perfunctory. "Looks great, sis. Whatever you think is best. Sorry, crazy busy with this new sponsorship. I trust your judgment." 3 months before the event, I sent the first invoice breakdown, $6,000 each person. Daniel called immediately. "Hey, Amelia. About the anniversary. Things are a bit tight right now. I've got this development deal tying up my liquidity. Can I get you the money next month?" Rachel's text came an hour later. "So can I pay my share closer to the date? Just booked a major campaign that pays net, 60. I felt the first flicker of unease, but pushed it aside. My siblings were successful in their fields. Surely they would come through as promised. 2 months before the party, the yacht company required a 50% deposit to secure the date. The orchestra needed payment in full. The specialty wine selection had to be ordered in advance. "Guys, I need your contributions now," I explained during a conference call. "I've already put down $2,500 for my share, but there's another $9,000 due this week. Just put it on your credit card," Daniel suggested casually. "You can get those travel points you're always talking about. I'll pay you back before the interest hits." "Yeah, I'm waiting on this big payment," Rachel added. "But it's guaranteed money, I promise." Against my better judgment, I covered the deposits. My credit card balance climbed, but I consoled myself with the knowledge that my siblings would reimburse me soon. I ignored the subtle warning signs, Daniel's new Mercedes, Rachel's posts from weekend trips to the Hamptons. 1 month before the party, I sent another reminder. By then, I had covered nearly $12,000 in total costs. My savings account was draining rapidly, and my credit card was approaching its limit. Rachel responded with a selfie from Bali. "Working on a major influencer project. The brand paid for my flight, but I'm covering all other expenses." We'll transfer money as soon as I'm back. Daniel sent a series of apologetic texts. Unexpected issues with the contractors on the new development. Had to put out some fires with cash. Bear with me, sis. As the final week before the party arrived, panic set in. I had to pay the outstanding balances, but my siblings' contributions were still nowhere in sight. I scheduled an emergency meeting at my apartment. I need to know if you're going to pay your shares, I said firmly as they settled onto my couch. I've covered almost everything so far, and I can't float any more expenses. Daniel and Rachel exchanged glances before Daniel cleared his throat. Look, Amelia, I hate to do this to you, but I'm in a really tight spot. That development in Charlestown hit major permitting issues. I had to pay attorneys, expedite fees, all kinds of unexpected costs. I just don't have the cash right now. Rachel at least had the decency to look embarrassed. My Bali campaign fell through at the last minute. The brand decided to go with someone with more followers. I spent all that money traveling there for nothing. I stared at them in disbelief. So you're telling me, 1 week before the party, that neither of you can contribute anything? After agreeing to split it equally. We didn't know things would get so expensive, Rachel protested. The yacht, the orchestra, the premium wines, it all adds up to so much. You approved every expense. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You saw all the quotes. You agreed to everything. Daniel leaned forward, his expression shifting to the same persuasive look he used to charm investors. Amelia, you're the only one of us with real financial stability. You have savings, a 401k. This kind of temporary cash flow issue doesn't hit you like it does us entrepreneurs. Entrepreneur. I repeated incredulously. Rachel, you post pictures on Instagram for a living. It's content creation, she snapped. And it's highly volatile income. As their excuses continued, the reality of the situation became painfully clear. They had never intended to contribute equally. They had assumed. No, expected, that I would cover the majority of costs as I had done so many times before. Mom and Dad would be devastated if we canceled now, Rachel said, her voice trembling slightly. All their friends are coming. It would be so embarrassing for them. And there it was, the ultimate manipulation. They knew I would never disappoint our parents. They knew I would sacrifice whatever necessary to avoid causing our parents pain. That night, after they left, I made the hardest financial decision of my life. I withdrew $10,000 from my home down payment fund, money I'd been saving for 5 years. I transferred the remaining balance from my emergency savings. I maxed out my credit card for the final $2,000. As I confirmed the final payments for the yacht, the catering, the orchestra, and the premium wine selection, I told myself it would be worth it. My parents would finally see my devotion. My siblings would eventually repay me. This grand gesture would change the family dynamic forever. I couldn't have known then how right I was, though not in the way I had hoped. The week before the party was a blur of final arrangements. I confirmed details with vendors, created seating charts, and assembled welcome gifts for the guests. Meanwhile, my bank account balance had never been lower, and my credit card had never been higher. The day after our confrontation, Daniel called. Hey sis, I've been thinking about our conversation, and I feel terrible about the situation. A flutter of hope rose in my chest. So you found a way to contribute? Not exactly, he hesitated. But I promise I'll pay you back as soon as this development deal closes. 3 months tops. With interest. What kind of interest? I asked, my financial analyst brain automatically calculating. I don't know, whatever's fair. 5%. It was better than nothing. I made him put it in writing, an email outlining the amount owed and the repayment timeline. Rachel sent a similar message, though her repayment date was vaguer, as soon as my next big campaign pays out. I tried to focus on the positive. The party would be magnificent. My parents would be overjoyed. And eventually, my siblings would make things right. 2 days before the event, I visited the yacht for a final inspection. The Serenity was even more beautiful than in the photos, gleaming wood, polished brass, elegant furnishings. The events coordinator walked me through the space, pointing out where the orchestra would set up, how the dining area would be arranged, where the bar would be positioned. Your parents are very lucky, she commented. Most children don't go to such lengths for an anniversary. It's a family gift, I said automatically, the lie sticking in my throat. From all three of us. That evening, my parents called to express their excitement. We can't believe you kids arranged something so spectacular, Mom gushed. A yacht. We're so touched by your generosity. Daniel mentioned there would be a live orchestra, Dad added. That must have cost a fortune. I swallowed hard. Daniel mentioned the orchestra. Yes, he was telling the Wilsons all about it at their dinner party last weekend. Said it was his idea since he remembered how much we love classical music. The revelation felt like a physical blow. Daniel was already taking credit for my idea, my research, my expense. And Rachel showed me the wine list, Mom continued. She said she specifically selected Dad's favorite Bordeaux. Such a thoughtful touch. My hand tightened around the phone. Did she mention who paid for that wine? What do you mean, dear? She said it was from all three of you. I wanted to scream the truth, to expose my siblings' lies and manipulation. But I couldn't bring myself to taint my parents' excitement. Their anniversary was in 2 days. I wouldn't ruin it with family drama. That's right, I forced myself to say. It's from all of us. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment surrounded by party favors. I was assembling custom photo albums with pictures from my parents' 35 years together. Another expense I had covered entirely on my own. My siblings hadn't even contributed photos. I checked my bank account one more time, the numbers glaring back at me, $342.19 remaining in my checking account. My savings account, which had contained over $15,000 just months ago, now held a mere $103.45. My credit card was maxed out at its $8,000 limit. In total, I had spent $18,500 on this celebration. A celebration for which my brother and sister would receive equal credit despite contributing nothing. I told myself it would be worth it when I saw my parents' faces. When they realized the lengths I had gone to make their anniversary special. When they finally acknowledged my dedication. Looking back, I realized I was still clinging to the fantasy that this grand gesture would somehow heal the inequities in our family dynamic. That it would finally earn me the recognition I had been seeking my entire life. The night before the party, I could barely sleep. Partly from excitement, partly from anxiety over my financial situation, but mostly from a growing unease I couldn't quite name. Something felt wrong beyond the money. Some fundamental imbalance in my family that no yacht party could fix. Little did I know that the financial deception was only the first betrayal awaiting me. The day of the anniversary party arrived with perfect weather, sunny with a gentle breeze, ideal conditions for a harbor cruise. I arrived at the marina 3 hours early to oversee the final preparations. The yacht was being decorated with elegant floral arrangements in my mother's favorite colors, cream and pale blue. The orchestra members were setting up their equipment, occasionally testing their instruments with brief, beautiful phrases that echoed across the water. The catering staff arranged serving stations and prepared the bar. I inspected the wine selection, ensuring my father's favorite Bordeaux was prominently displayed. Everything was coming together exactly as I had envisioned. Daniel arrived 90 minutes before guests were due, Jenna on his arm in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Wow, sis, you've outdone yourself," he said, surveying the yacht with appreciative eyes. "This looks incredible." "It really does," Jenna agreed. "Your parents are going to be blown away." Rachel arrived moments later, already taking photos for her Instagram. "This lighting is perfect. The sunset is going to be amazing for my content." Neither of them offered to help with the last-minute details. Instead, they explored the yacht, sampling hors d'oeuvres and testing the premium champagne I had selected for the welcome toast. Guests began arriving at 6 p.m. Family friends, my parents' colleagues, relatives who had traveled from across the country. Everyone exclaimed over the beautiful setting, the elegant decorations, the obvious expense and thought that had gone into the event. "Your parents must be so proud of you three," Mrs. Wilson said, patting my arm. "Such devoted children." Daniel, standing nearby, smoothly inserted himself into the conversation. "We wanted to give back to them after all they've done for us. The yacht was actually my idea. Dad always loved being on the water." I bit my tongue, forcing a smile as Mrs. Wilson turned to compliment him on his thoughtfulness. At 6:30 p.m., my parents arrived. My mother gasped as she saw the yacht, tears immediately forming in her eyes. My father stood speechless, taking in the scene with obvious emotion. "Welcome to your 35th anniversary celebration," I said, handing them each a glass of champagne. "We can't believe you did this for us," Mom said, embracing each of us in turn. "All three of you working together to create this," Dad added, his voice thick. "That's the best gift of all." The orchestra began playing as we boarded, a gentle melody that served as background for the cocktail hour. Guests mingled on the main deck as the yacht pulled away from the dock, the Boston skyline creating a spectacular backdrop. Dinner was served on the upper deck, a gourmet meal featuring all of my parents' favorites. The wine flowed freely, and conversation filled the air with laughter and reminiscence. Throughout the evening, I found myself running interference on small issues, adjusting the temperature when Mom felt cold, asking the bartender to prepare Dad's favorite cocktail, directing the photographer to capture special moments between my parents and their oldest friends. Meanwhile, Daniel charmed everyone with stories, making sure to mention his new development project. Rachel posed for countless photos, tagging vendors and including carefully crafted captions that made it seem as though she had been the primary organizer. The string quartet was Rachel's brilliant idea. I overheard Daniel telling our great-aunt. She remembered how Mom and Dad met at the symphony. Rachel nodded, accepting the praise. And Daniel arranged for Dad's favorite wines. He has such amazing connections in the industry. My throat tightened as I walked away, seeking a moment of solitude. I found myself in the small bathroom on the lower deck, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me, exhausted, hurt, trying desperately to hold everything together while my siblings stole credit for my sacrifices. A knock at the door startled me. "Amelia? Are you in there?" It was Stephanie, my best friend and colleague, the only non-family member I had invited. I opened the door, quickly wiping away the tears I hadn't realized I'd shed. Stephanie took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "What's wrong?" "The party is amazing. Everyone's having a wonderful time." "It's nothing," I said automatically, the deflection so practiced it came without thought. "It's not nothing. I've known you for 10 years. Talk to me." The concern in her eyes broke something in me, and the truth spilled out, how I had covered all the expenses, how my siblings had promised to pay their shares, but hadn't contributed a dime, how they were now taking credit for all the thoughtful touches I had planned. And the worst part, I confessed, is that I've completely emptied my savings. I used money from my home down payment fund, maxed out my credit card. All for a party where everyone thinks we contributed equally. Stephanie's expression shifted from concern to outrage. "That's not right, Amelia. You need to tell your parents the truth." I shook my head. "I can't ruin their anniversary. They're so happy right now." As we spoke, I could hear the orchestra beginning the special piece I had arranged, Pachelbel's Canon, my parents' wedding song. Above us, guests would be watching as my parents shared their anniversary dance. "I should get back up there," I said, straightening my dress. "They'll be cutting the cake soon." As we made our way back to the main deck, we passed Daniel and Rachel near the bar, their voices carrying clearly in the night air. "Amelia always does this," Rachel was saying, a slight slur in her voice suggesting she'd had too much champagne. "Makes herself the martyr. Look at me, I planned everything, I'm so responsible." Daniel laughed. "At least she's good for something. She always pays for everything." "Because she has nothing else going on in her life," Rachel replied. "No boyfriend, no social media presence, just her spreadsheets and savings account." They hadn't noticed us standing there, frozen in the shadows of the corridor. "Let's go," Stephanie whispered, trying to pull me away. But I couldn't move, their words replaying in my mind like a cruel echo. Is that how they saw me? As nothing more than a bank account and an event planner? As someone with nothing else going on in her life? The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I plastered on a smile, helped my parents cut their anniversary cake, directed the photographer to capture all the important moments. But inside, something had shattered my illusions about my family, my place in it, the meaning of my sacrifices. As the yacht returned to the harbor and guests began to disembark, my parents embraced each of us again. "This was the most wonderful night," Mom said, her eyes shining with happy tears. "We are so blessed to have such amazing children." "All three of you," Dad added, working together to create this beautiful celebration. "We couldn't be prouder." Daniel and Rachel beamed, accepting the praise as though they deserved it. I smiled too, but the expression felt hollow, disconnected from the turmoil inside me. That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at my depleted bank accounts and maxed-out credit card. The enormity of what I had done and what had been done to me began to sink in. I had spent $18,500 on a beautiful illusion, a perfect family celebration that masked the ugly reality beneath. But the financial betrayal, painful as it was, seemed almost secondary now to the greater betrayal, the realization that my siblings saw me as nothing more than a useful resource to be exploited, and that my parents couldn't see beyond the perfect family image to the truth of our dynamic. Little did I know that the worst betrayals were yet to come. A week after the yacht party, my mother called to invite me to Sunday brunch at their house. "Just family," she said. "We want to thank you kids properly for the wonderful celebration." Despite my lingering hurt, I accepted the invitation. Perhaps in the intimate setting of our family home, away from the spectacle of the party, I could finally address the financial situation with my siblings. When I arrived, the house smelled of fresh coffee and Dad's famous blueberry pancakes. Mom was setting the dining room table with her best china, the set reserved for special occasions. Daniel and Rachel were already there, looking surprisingly well-rested considering I had spent the week working overtime to try to recover some of my financial losses. "There she is," Dad called from the kitchen. "The mastermind behind the party of the year." I forced a smile, hanging my coat in the hallway closet. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." "Enjoyed it?" "Eleanor, tell her what the Petersons said," Dad prompted. Mom beamed. "Margaret Peterson called it the most elegant event she's attended in years. She couldn't stop talking about that string orchestra." "And Dad's golf buddies were impressed by that Bordeaux selection," Daniel added, clapping me on the shoulder as though we shared a secret. "Well done, sis." The praise felt hollow given what I knew about their true contributions, but I stayed silent as we moved to the dining room. Dad brought out platters of pancakes, bacon, and fresh fruit, while Mom poured mimosas for everyone. "A toast," Dad said, raising his glass. "To our incredible children. Your mother and I couldn't have imagined a more perfect celebration. You three working together made us prouder than anything." We clinked glasses, and for a moment, I almost convinced myself to let it go. Maybe the money wasn't worth disrupting this harmonious family image. Maybe I should just accept my role as the responsible one who took care of everyone else. Then Mom mentioned the future. "You know, the Wilsons were telling us about their trip to Napa Valley wine country," she said, passing the maple syrup. "It sounded wonderful. Your father and I have always wanted to go." "You should," Daniel said. "After 35 years, you deserve it." "We've been thinking about it for next summer," Dad continued. "Maybe for a week or so, visiting different vineyards, staying at some nice bed and breakfasts." "That sounds perfect," Rachel enthused. "I could feature it on my travel highlights. My followers would love that content." "Amelia can handle all the bookings," Mom added casually. "She did such a wonderful job with the anniversary party. She knows exactly what we like." And there it was, the assumption that I would once again take on the planning, likely the expense as well. As if the yacht party had been nothing more than a practice run for future family events I would organize and fund. Something inside me snapped. "Actually," I said, setting down my fork carefully, "I don't think I'll be planning any family trips for a while." A brief silence fell over the table. "What do you mean, dear?" Mom asked, her smile faltering slightly. "I mean that I spent $18,500 on the anniversary party. Not we. Me." The words came out calmly, almost clinically. Daniel and Rachel didn't contribute a single dollar. All eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from shock, my parents, to outrage, my siblings. "Amelia, that's not fair," Daniel started. "We explained our situation. You explained why you couldn't pay your shares a week before the event, after months of promising you would," I interrupted. after I had already put down non-refundable deposits and paid most of the vendors in full. Mom looked between us, confusion evident on her face. I thought this was a joint gift from all three of you. So did I replied. That was the original plan. We were each supposed to contribute equally, about $6,000 per person. But when it came time to pay, I was the only one who did. We had financial setbacks, Rachel protested. My Bali campaign fell through and Daniel had issues with his development project. Yet somehow you afforded a new designer bag last month, I countered, and Daniel just leased a new Mercedes. Dad cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Amelia, these financial arrangements were between you three. Your mother and I don't need to be involved. His dismissal felt like a physical blow. Don't need to be involved? It was your anniversary party. Yes, and it was lovely, Mom said, clearly trying to defuse the situation. But if there were agreements between you children that weren't kept, you need to work that out yourselves. I stared at her in disbelief. I emptied my savings account for this party. I used money from my home down payment fund. I maxed out my credit card. Well, Dad said, frowning slightly, that doesn't sound like very responsible financial planning, Amelia. You make good money at your firm. You shouldn't have spent beyond your means. The injustice of his words left me speechless. Daniel seized the opportunity to shift the narrative. We never asked you to spend that much, he said. The yacht, the premium catering, the top-shelf liquor, those were all your choices. You kept upgrading everything without consulting us. That's not true, I protested. I sent every quote, every invoice. You approved everything. You're always doing this, Rachel interjected. Making yourself out to be the victim, the martyr who sacrifices everything for the family. It's exhausting. Tears stung my eyes as I looked around the table. My father was studying his plate with uncomfortable intensity. My mother was nervously twisting her napkin. My siblings wore matching expressions of righteous indignation, as though I had somehow wronged them by exposing their deception. So that's it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I spend $18,500 on your anniversary party, and not only do I get no help from my siblings, but I'm being criticized for mentioning it. No one forced you to spend that money, Daniel said coldly. And bringing it up now during a family brunch, Rachel added, is just creating drama. I looked to my parents, hoping against hope that they would intervene, that they would hold my siblings accountable, that they would acknowledge the unfairness of the situation. Instead, my father sighed heavily. Amelia, we appreciate everything you did for the party. It was beautiful. But Rachel's right, this isn't the time or place for this conversation. In that moment, I understood with devastating clarity that my family would never see me as I truly was. They would never value my contributions or hold my siblings to the same standards they held me. In their eyes, I would always be the responsible one expected to give endlessly without recognition or reciprocation. I placed my napkin beside my half-eaten breakfast and stood up. I need to go. Amelia, don't be like this, Mom pleaded. Sit down and finish your brunch. We can talk about something else. I don't think there's anything else to say, I replied, gathering my purse and jacket. As I walked to my car, I could feel the weight of years of unbalanced expectations crushing down on me. I had always been the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who would sacrifice her own needs for the family. And in return, I had received, what? Dismissal. Gaslighting. The expectation that I would continue giving indefinitely. My phone began ringing almost immediately after I left, my mother, then my father, then Daniel. I silenced each call, too raw to engage in further conversation. Whatever they wanted to say could wait until I had processed this new reality. I drove aimlessly, eventually finding myself at a small park overlooking the harbor. In the distance, I could see yachts similar to the one I had chartered for my parents' anniversary, sailing serenely across the water, carrying people celebrating their own special moments. I wondered how many of those celebrations masked similar family dynamics, the uneven expectations, the unseen sacrifices, the carefully maintained illusions of perfect family harmony. As the sun began to set, I made a decision. I would no longer empty myself to fill others. I would no longer accept being valued only for what I could provide. I would demand the respect and recognition I deserved, or I would walk away. Little did I know that my family wasn't done testing those boundaries. The third betrayal was about to cut deeper than I could have imagined. The following evening, I was at home reviewing my budget, trying to create a financial recovery plan, when my phone rang. It was Rachel. I hesitated, still raw from the brunch confrontation, but eventually answered. Amelia? Rachel's voice sounded panicked. Thank God you picked up. I need your help. Despite everything, my instinct to protect my younger sister kicked in. What's wrong? My car broke down on Route 9, about a mile past the Newton exit. I called roadside assistance, but they said it'll be at least an hour before they can get here. I don't feel safe waiting alone in the dark. I glanced at the clock, 9:40 p.m. on a Monday night. Where's Daniel? Or one of your friends? Daniel's not answering. Please, Amelia. I'm really scared out here. I sighed, already reaching for my keys. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Stay in your car with the doors locked. The drive gave me time to think. Perhaps this emergency would provide an opportunity to have a real conversation with Rachel, away from Daniel's influence and our parents' enabling. Maybe we could find a path forward. When I arrived, I spotted Rachel's white BMW on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. I pulled up behind her and texted to let her know I had arrived. She emerged from her car, looking surprisingly composed for someone who had been really scared moments earlier. Her designer coat was perfectly arranged, not a hair out of place. Thanks for coming, she said as she slid into my passenger seat. Roadside assistance said it might be a fuel pump issue. They're sending a tow truck. No problem, I replied, turning up the heat. Are you okay? Yeah, just annoyed. I was on my way back from a meeting with a potential sponsor. She pulled out her phone, checking her notifications. So, about yesterday. I tensed, preparing for another argument. What about it? You caught us off guard, bringing up the money stuff in front of Mom and Dad like that. I stared at her incredulously. That's what you're concerned about? Not the fact that you and Daniel left me with $18,500 in expenses. We explained our situations, she said defensively. And we will pay you back eventually. But making Mom and Dad uncomfortable wasn't cool. Rachel, I emptied my savings account for that party. I used money I'd been saving for a home down payment. I maxed out my credit card. And neither you nor Daniel seems to care. She shrugged, scrolling through her Instagram feed. Everyone has financial setbacks sometimes. You'll bounce back. You always do. Her cavalier attitude left me momentarily speechless. Then I noticed something on her phone screen, a text notification from a name that made my heart stop. Jackson. Jackson Reed had been my boyfriend for 3 years. We had broken up 6 months ago when he claimed he needed space and wasn't ready for commitment. The breakup had devastated me. We had been discussing marriage, looking at apartments together. Are you texting Jackson? I asked, my voice strangely calm despite the sudden hollowness in my chest. Rachel's thumb froze over her screen. For the first time that evening, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. Oh, yeah, we've been talking a bit. Talking, I repeated. You and my ex-boyfriend have been talking. She tucked her phone away, not meeting my eyes. Actually, Amelia, that's something I've been meaning to tell you. Jackson and I have been seeing each other. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Seeing each other? As in dating? Yes, she admitted. For a couple of months now. A couple of months. My mind raced through the timeline. We only broke up 6 months ago. Rachel shifted in her seat. Well, it started a little before that. The implication hit me with stunning force. Before we broke up? You were seeing Jackson while he was still my boyfriend. It wasn't like that, she protested. We just talked at first. He was having doubts about your relationship. He said you were always too focused on work to keep him happy. Each word felt like a physical blow. My sister, my own sister, had begun a relationship with my boyfriend while we were still together. Had likely been the cause of our breakup. How could you do that? I whispered, too shocked for anger. You're my sister. It just happened, she said, as if we were discussing something as inconsequential as a haircut. We connected. And honestly, Amelia, you and Jackson weren't right for each other. You were always working late, saving for your precious house, planning for the future instead of living in the moment. The justification was so self-serving, so perfectly aligned with Rachel's self-centered worldview that I almost laughed. Does everyone know about this? I asked, suddenly remembering how my mother had asked about Jackson recently, something she hadn't done in months. Rachel's uncomfortable expression told me everything. They know, I realized. Mom, Dad, Daniel, they all know you're dating my ex-boyfriend. They figured it would be easier on you if we kept it quiet for a while, she explained. But actually, that's partly why I wanted to talk to you tonight. Jackson's coming to dinner at Mom and Dad's this Sunday, and I wanted to ask you to be cool about it. For the family's sake. For the family's sake. The phrase echoed in my mind, illuminating years of similar requests. Be cool about Daniel getting a car for graduation while you got a watch. Be cool about Rachel getting a fully funded semester abroad while you worked summer jobs to pay for textbooks. Be cool about your parents remortgaging their house to fund Daniel's business venture while telling you that helping with your student loans would rob you of independence. Always, always, for the family's sake. Mom and Dad are really excited, Rachel continued, oblivious to my internal revelation. They always liked Jackson. Dad thinks he's finally with the right Mitchell daughter. The casual cruelty of the statement broke something in me. Tears sprang to my eyes, hot and sudden. Get out of my car, I said quietly. What? Amelia, don't be dramatic. The tow truck isn't even here yet. Get out of my car now. She stared at me, finally registering the depth of my hurt. You're seriously overreacting. Jackson and I. Get out. I shouted, my voice cracking with emotion. Rachel flinched, then gathered her purse with deliberate slowness. Fine. I'll wait in my car. But you need to grow up, Amelia. This is why you're always alone. You can't handle when things don't go your way. She exited my car, slamming the door with unnecessary force. Through my tears, I watched her strut back to her BMW, illuminated by my headlights. My phone pinged with a text from her moments later. Tow truck just called. They're 5 minutes away. You can go. Without responding, I put my car in gear and pulled away from the shoulder, leaving Rachel behind. In my rearview mirror, I saw her standing beside her car, looking indignant and shocked that I would actually abandon her. But hadn't she abandoned me first? Hadn't my entire family? I drove aimlessly, tears blurring my vision, until I found myself at a scenic overlook above the city. Parking in the deserted lot, I finally allowed myself to break down completely, sobbing until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. The betrayal felt total and absolute. My sister had not only begun a relationship with my ex-boyfriend while we were still together, but had enlisted my entire family in keeping it from me. They had chosen her happiness over my feelings, her relationship over my heartbreak. And they expected me to accept it with a smile, to sit across the dinner table from the man I had loved and the sister who had taken him, and pretend that everything was fine for the family's sake. As the tears finally subsided, leaving me hollow and exhausted, I realized with absolute clarity that the dynamics in my family would never change. I would always be the one expected to sacrifice, to understand, to accept less than I deserved. Unless I changed them myself. Little did I know that the universe wasn't done testing my limits. The final betrayal was waiting for me when I returned home, a betrayal that would leave me with nothing but trash bags full of belongings and nowhere to go. It was past midnight when I finally returned to my apartment building. Emotionally drained and physically exhausted, I wanted nothing more than to collapse into bed and shut out the world for a few hours. But as I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed an unfamiliar car in my designated spot, a silver sedan with the logo of a property management company on its door. Standing beside it was Mr. Patel, my landlord, his expression grim even in the dim light of the parking area. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I parked in a visitor spot and approached him. Mr. Patel? Is everything okay? He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Miss Mitchell, I've been trying to reach you all day. I'm sorry, I've had my phone on silent. A lie, I had been ignoring calls after the confrontation with Rachel. What's going on? He handed me an official-looking document. I'm afraid I have to serve you with this eviction notice. The words hit me like a physical blow. Eviction? There must be a mistake. I've always paid my rent on time. Not for the past 2 months, he replied, gesturing to the document in my hands. Your checks have been bouncing. I stared at the paper, trying to make sense of the information. 2 months of bounced checks? But I had set up automatic payments from my checking account years ago. Then the reality crashed down on me. I had emptied that account to pay for the anniversary party. Mr. Patel, this is a misunderstanding. I had a temporary financial issue, but I can fix this. I can pay you right now with a different card. He shook his head. I'm sorry, Miss Mitchell. The property management company has already initiated proceedings. They've instructed me not to accept any payments at this point. But where am I supposed to go? The panic was rising in my voice. I need time to find a new place. The notice gives you 24 hours to vacate the premises, he said, looking genuinely regretful. I tried to argue for more time, but given the length of non-payment, they were quite firm. 24 hours. 1 day to pack up 5 years of life in this apartment. 1 day to find somewhere else to live. The impossibility of the situation left me momentarily speechless. I've always been a good tenant, I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. 5 years, never a complaint, never a late payment until now. I know, Mr. Patel said, his expression softening slightly. That's why I'm here past midnight instead of having the notice taped to your door. I thought you deserved the courtesy of a personal explanation. The kindness, small as it was, nearly broke me. After the betrayals from my family, this basic human decency from my landlord brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, I said, wiping at my cheeks. I appreciate that. He nodded awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with my emotional response. The building manager will be here tomorrow at 5 p.m. to collect your keys and inspect the apartment. Again, I'm very sorry about this, Miss Mitchell. As he drove away, I stood in the parking lot, the eviction notice clutched in my hand, trying to process this latest blow. How had things fallen apart so completely in just over a week? Inside my apartment, I moved on autopilot, pulling out my phone to call the only people I thought I could rely on in a crisis, my family. Despite everything, some part of me still believed they would help when it truly mattered. My mother answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with sleep. Amelia? It's almost 1 in the morning. Is everything all right? No, Mom. Everything is not all right, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I've been evicted from my apartment. I need a place to stay for a few weeks while I figure things out. There was a pause, then the sound of my father's voice in the background asking what was happening. My mother explained in muffled tones. Evicted? She repeated, fully awake now. How's that possible? You're always so responsible with money. The irony of her statement was not lost on me. I had some unexpected expenses recently, like an $18,500 anniversary party. Another pause. Oh, Amelia, I'm so sorry. But our guest room is in the middle of renovations. The furniture is all in storage and there's no bed. It was a lie. I had been in their guest room just 2 weeks ago when I dropped off anniversary gifts. It had been perfectly intact. I can sleep on the couch, I suggested, desperation creeping into my voice. Your father's back has been acting up. He's been sleeping on the couch some nights when the pain is bad. Another lie, my father had always refused to sleep anywhere but in their bedroom. I understood then that they were not going to help me. They were choosing comfort and convenience over their daughter's urgent need. I'll try Daniel, I said, ending the call before my mother could offer more excuses. Daniel answered quickly, sounding surprisingly alert for the late hour. Amelia? What's up? I explained the situation, each word feeling like a surrender of pride. That's rough, sis, he said, with what sounded like genuine sympathy. But we've actually just converted the spare room into a nursery. Jenna's pregnant. The news hit me like another slap. My brother was having a baby, news that would normally be cause for celebration, and no one had thought to tell me. Congratulations, I said automatically. When is she due? October, he replied. We were going to announce it at Sunday dinner, but with everything that happened at brunch yesterday. 5 months pregnant. News that had been shared with everyone but me. I understand, I said, though I didn't. Not really. I'll try Rachel. Good luck with that, Daniel said, an odd note in his voice. She texted earlier saying you abandoned her on the side of the road. She told you that? I asked incredulously. Did she mention why? Something about Jackson, he said vaguely. Look, Amelia, I've got an early meeting tomorrow. Keep me posted on the apartment situation, okay? After Daniel hung up, I tried Rachel multiple times, but each call went straight to voicemail. I left increasingly desperate messages, explaining the eviction, begging for just a few days on her couch. She never called back. As dawn broke, I faced the reality of my situation. I had less than 18 hours to pack up my life and find somewhere to go. My family, the people I had sacrificed so much for, had abandoned me in my moment of greatest need. With shaking hands, I called the only person I had left, Stephanie. I need help, I said when she answered, no longer trying to hide the tears. I've been evicted and I have nowhere to go. Without hesitation, she replied, I'm on my way. Pack what you need for a few days. You can stay with me while we figure this out. For hours later, my apartment looked like a disaster zone. I had managed to pack my most essential belongings, clothes, important documents, sentimental items, but much would have to be left behind. I had no storage unit, no money for movers, no time to make proper arrangements. When the building manager arrived at 5 p.m., I was standing in the parking lot surrounded by garbage bags full of clothes, a suitcase of documents, and a few boxes of personal items. Stephanie had helped me load what we could into her car, but so much remained. I need more time, I pleaded with the manager. Just a few more days to arrange storage for my furniture, my books, everything else. I'm sorry, but the company policy is clear, he replied, unmoved by my distress. Anything left in the unit after handover becomes property of the building. You can contact the office next week about arranging a time to collect the rest, but I can't promise anything. As I handed over my keys, a light rain began to fall, quickly soaking through the garbage bags containing my clothes. It felt like the final indignity, standing in the rain watching my life disintegrate, literally and figuratively. Stephanie put her arm around my shoulders. Come on. Let's go to my place. We'll figure this out together. The drive to her apartment passed in a blur. I stared out the window at the city lights reflecting off the wet streets, trying to comprehend how completely my life had collapsed in just 10 days. From a successful financial analyst with savings, a nice apartment, and what I thought was a loving family, to homeless, nearly broke, and utterly alone except for one true friend. All because I had tried to create a perfect anniversary celebration for parents who, when it came down to it, wouldn't even offer me their couch in an emergency. As we carried the soaked garbage bags into Stephanie's apartment, she said something that cut through my fog of despair. You know this isn't normal, right? What your family did before the eviction, but especially after. This isn't how healthy families treat each other. The simple statement hit me with the force of revelation. I had spent my entire life trying to earn my family's love and approval, believing that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, achieved enough, they would finally see and value me. But what if that was never going to happen? What if the problem wasn't what I was or wasn't doing, but the fundamental dynamic of our relationship? What if, after all these years of trying to be enough for my family, the truth was that they would never be enough for me, never provide the love, support, and recognition that I deserved? That night, on Stephanie's pull-out couch, surrounded by the damp remnants of my possessions, I finally allowed myself to consider a possibility that had always been too painful to acknowledge. Maybe the family I had sacrificed everything for didn't deserve my sacrifice. Maybe it was time to rebuild, not just my bank account and my living situation, but my entire understanding of what family truly meant. 3 months after standing in the rain with garbage bags full of my belongings, I was unpacking the last box in my new studio apartment. It was small, significantly smaller than my previous place, but it was mine, and I had worked incredibly hard to get here. The journey hadn't been easy. After a week on Stephanie's couch, I had found a temporary sublet, a tiny room in a shared apartment with 3 graduate students. I had taken a weekend job at a local coffee shop to supplement my income and rebuild my savings. Between my regular job and weekend shifts, I was working nearly 70 hours a week. My financial recovery plan was strict and unforgiving. No eating out, no new clothes, no unnecessary expenses of any kind. Every extra dollar went toward rebuilding my emergency fund and saving for first and last month's rent on a new place. The physical and financial recovery, challenging as it was, proved easier than the emotional healing. I had maintained minimal contact with my family during these 3 months, responding to texts with brief, non-committal messages, declining invitations to family gatherings with vague excuses about work. My phone rang as I flattened the last empty box. It was my mother, her 4th call this week. "Amelia? Are you there?" "Hi, Mom," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "We haven't seen you in so long," she said, a note of accusation in her voice. "Everyone's asking where you've been." "I've been busy," I said, the same response I had given for months. "Too busy for family?" The guilt trip was familiar territory. "We're having Sunday dinner this weekend. Your father's grilling steaks. Daniel and Jenna will be there. The ultrasound showed they're having a boy. And Rachel wants to discuss her engagement party. Jackson proposed last weekend." The news of Rachel's engagement should have hurt, but I felt only a distant echo of pain. 3 months of therapy and support group meetings for people healing from family trauma had given me perspective I never had before. "I can't make it this Sunday," I said firmly. "Amelia," my mother sighed, "I don't understand what's happening with you. Ever since the anniversary party, you've been so distant. If this is still about the money." "It was never just about the money, Mom," I interrupted. "It was about respect. Recognition. Being valued for more than what I could provide." "Of course we value you," she protested. "You're our daughter." "Then where were you when I was evicted?" The question had been building for months. "When I called you in the middle of the night, desperate for a place to stay, why did you lie about your guest room being renovated?" The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. "I don't expect an answer," I continued. "I've stopped expecting things from you all. But I want you to know that I'm doing well now. I have a new apartment. I'm rebuilding my savings. I'm going to be okay, not because of family support, but despite the lack of it." "Amelia, that's not fair. We've always supported you. When it was convenient. When it didn't require sacrifice on your part. When it fit the family narrative." The therapy sessions had given me words for feelings I had never been able to articulate before. "I gave everything to create the perfect anniversary celebration for you and Dad. I emptied my savings, maxed out my credit card. And when I needed help in return, you all had excuses." "We didn't ask you to spend all that money," she said, the familiar refrain. "No, you didn't. But you accepted it. You enjoyed the yacht, the orchestra, the premium wines. You accepted the sacrifice without acknowledging it. And then, when I needed help, you turned away." Another silence, longer this time. "I need to go, Mom," I said finally. "My new place isn't going to unpack itself." After ending the call, I stood in the middle of my small studio, looking at the modest furnishings I had been able to afford, mostly secondhand, nothing like the tasteful decor of my previous apartment. But each piece represented my independence, my resilience, my refusal to be defined by my family's treatment of me. My phone pinged with a text from an unexpected source. "Jenna, Daniel's wife. Are you free for coffee tomorrow? Just the 2 of us." I hesitated, then replied, 1 p.m. at Lighthouse Cafe. Her response came quickly. "Perfect. See you then." The next day, sitting across from Jenna at a corner table, I was struck by how nervous she seemed, so different from her usual confident demeanor. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, hands wrapped around her mug. "I've wanted to talk to you for months, but Daniel didn't want you to?" I guessed. She nodded. "What happened to you wasn't right, Amelia. The party, the eviction, all of it. I tried to tell Daniel we should help, offer our guest room until the nursery renovation started, but he was so worried about upsetting his parents. The admission shouldn't have surprised me, but it did." "So you knew?" "About the eviction." "Everyone knew," she confirmed quietly. "Rachel told us the day after it happened. She said you had called her asking for help." "And no one thought to reach out? To offer assistance?" Jenna looked down at her coffee. "Your father said you were being dramatic, that you'd figure it out on your own because you always do. Daniel didn't want to go against him." "And you?" I asked, trying to keep accusation from my voice. "I should have called you anyway," she admitted. It's been eating at me for months. I'm sorry, Amelia. Truly sorry. The apology, unexpected as it was, loosened something in my chest. For months, I had carried the weight of my family's rejection, wondering if I had somehow deserved it. Hearing Jenna acknowledge the wrongness of their actions validated what my therapist had been telling me all along. This wasn't about my failings, but about their inability to give what I needed. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. I'm not just here to apologize, Jenna continued. I want you to know that your nephew will know who you are, regardless of what's happening with the rest of the family. If you want to be in his life, that is. The offer brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I'd like that. As our conversation continued, Jenna shared more about the family dynamics she had observed since marrying Daniel 3 years ago, how my parents consistently expected more from me than from my siblings, how they dismissed my achievements while celebrating theirs, how they had normalized patterns of giving and taking that were fundamentally unbalanced. Daniel isn't a bad person, she said toward the end of our meeting. None of them are. But they've been playing these roles for so long, they don't know how to see you differently or how to see themselves differently. And I've been playing my role too, I acknowledged. The reliable one. The responsible one. The one who always gives more than she gets. Until now, Jenna pointed out. You're changing the script. That's bound to create resistance. As I walked home from the coffee shop, I reflected on how much had changed in 3 months. Not just my living situation or my financial status, but my understanding of myself and my relationships. My therapist had introduced me to the concept of chosen family, the idea that the most meaningful connections in our lives aren't necessarily those determined by blood, but those we cultivate through mutual respect, support, and love. Stephanie had been chosen family without me even realizing it. And now, perhaps, Jenna could be too. The weekend of Christmas arrived, bringing with it an invitation I had been dreading. The annual Mitchell family celebration at my parents' house. For the first time in my life, I declined, choosing instead to volunteer at a local shelter serving holiday meals. As I ladled cranberry sauce onto plates alongside other volunteers, many of whom were also navigating complicated family situations during the holidays, I felt a sense of community that had been missing from many family gatherings. A genuine connection based not on obligation or performance, but on shared humanity. That evening, alone in my studio apartment, but not lonely, I received an unexpected text from my father. We missed you today. 2 hours later, after considerable thought, I replied, I've been missing for years, Dad. You just didn't notice, because I was physically present. It was the most honest communication we had shared in perhaps our entire relationship. Whether it would lead to change, to healing, to a new understanding between us, I couldn't know. But I had spoken my truth, and that itself was a victory. In the months that followed, I continued to rebuild my finances, my independence, my sense of self-worth. I maintained limited contact with my family, engaging on my terms, with boundaries firmly in place. I attended Jenna's baby shower, politely acknowledged Rachel's engagement from a distance, and had occasional, carefully managed lunches with my mother. The relationship had fundamentally changed. I was no longer seeking their approval or validation. I was no longer measuring my worth by their recognition. I was no longer emptying myself to fill their expectations. In a strange way, the $18,500 I had spent on that anniversary party, money I would never recover, despite vague promises from my siblings, had purchased something priceless. The truth about my family and the courage to finally put myself first. As I stand here now, looking back on that rainy night with the garbage bags, I realize that what felt like the lowest point of my life was actually the beginning of its most authentic chapter. Sometimes we have to lose everything, money, possessions, illusions, to find what truly matters. Have you ever had to rebuild your life or redefine your relationships with family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences and lessons learned the hard way. Thank you for listening, and remember, blood makes you related, but loyalty and respect make you family. Sometimes the people who deserve your love and sacrifice aren't the ones you were born to, but the ones who show up when you need them most.